It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So you may remember last week I was in Washington, D.C. for a big event, and we stopped by Black Lives Matter Plaza to march on the picket line with our friends in the Writers Guild and the Screen Actors. And, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, the reality, like we talked about last week, is, you know, you've got to get out and you've got to make your message. You've got to get out and talk to people. You've got to be out and be a presence. So my son and I had a great opportunity with our friend Sarah Nelson, the president of the the Association of Flight Attendants over at CWA, to get out and do a little of just that. And while we were marching on the line, I met up with Elliot Bales. He is an actor, member of SAG-AFTRA, Actors Equity. He's a member of SAG-AFTRA's Washington Mid-Atlantic Local Board. Colonel in the U.S. Army, retired. This guy's everywhere and into everything, and some great roles that I saw. Elliot, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick. Appreciate the time.
So let me start where we are. Where are things right now with negotiations? Anything happening? Are we anywhere closer to this coming to an end? Anything?
Not at this point, and I'll speak from what I see in our communications with the national organization. We've been at this for 3 weeks. We left when they did not come to an agreement after giving them a 12-day extension, and they have not returned to the table or offered anything else.
So is the sense on your end, what I've had others tell me, that it's rumored that an executive said we're just going to starve them out until they lose their apartments and they go broke, and then they're going to come back begging? Is that kind of the sense, since there have been no negotiations? Yeah,
that was a statement made by some anonymous executive during the WGA strike before we even walked out. So that does seem to be a bit of the sentiment. I think there's a huge disconnect between people on yachts and at billionaires camps and those of us who are lunch pail, hard hat wearing actors who just, you know, work for a basic wage when we get to.
Now, it's interesting that you frame that like that, because, you know, when you talk to people, they think actors are, you know, everyone's Tom Cruise or Matt Damon, you know, people making, you know 17-figure salaries. But the reality is most of the SAG-AFTRA members, they're just working people trying to eke out an existence, right?
Right. So to qualify just for our basic tier of our health plan, costs, you have to earn revenue in SAG-AFTRA contracts of $26,470 in a year. 87% of our members don't even make that much. So that's in companies that make hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue. So that there's a little bit of a disconnect there. But yeah, no, we're not all from. Every time you see the word Hollywood, that's not who we are. Although we do have some great members who have walked away from very lucrative and expensive contracts. Those folks who do make millions, they're out with us as well. They're not working either. But it's really about, and they will tell you, this is about the journeyman actor. This is the person who gets up at 5 a.m. and shows up at a set and is there all day long in the heat and the cold. So that's really what this contract negotiation is about.
Now, what's the sticking points? You know, I've heard a bunch of stuff, you know, in the media. I've heard a bunch of statements. You know, what do you see as what's the holdup? What's being done here?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the two things that I think are at core that I think people will feel an understanding relationship to is pay and protection. 23% inflation over the last 6 years. And our contracts for 3 years and were fixed before that. So throughout the pandemic, we were set just a little over 2% a year. Obviously, inflation was much more significant to that. So right now we're making less than we would have made in 2020 in terms of real dollars. And so that sort of catch up, we've said, hey, catch us up in year one, and then we can go back to what we hope will be the rate of inflation. It's not tied to anything. And that's, we've come down, the negotiating team's come down from what they asked up front. and the other group hasn't moved at all. So there's just an unwillingness to recognize the plight of every American worker. I think that's across most working unions and most labor organizations today. And the second is protections. We see a growth in artificial intelligence, and that's not just about us. That's about, I think, every working American and every person who lives in this country. Your images, your voice, your photographs of your food, your photographs of your kids and your cats and your dogs are being taken by media corporations and used without your consent or without compensation to make them more money. And so they've actually put into their proposal, as we've talked about, hey, we want some constraints on that. We want some constraints on how you use our image in future technologies. And they've said, okay, we'll give you half a day's pay and we'll own your image and likeness in perpetuity and never pay you again.
Wow.
And not give you your consent for what we use it for. And we've just said, that's a hard no.
Yeah, that is a hard no. I mean, the fact that, they can slap your face on anything is pretty remarkable. Now, you talked about the pay part of this. $26,000 a year. I'm sorry, that's not. I don't see that as a living, considering that when you're pushing for a minimum wage of $15 an hour, which is what, about $31,200 a year. You're well below what any reasonable person would consider even a minimal existence.
Right, which is why I think the huge joke is on some executive that would say we're going to starve you out, because we're all doing other work. We're all doing other jobs. I mean, we have built careers to be able to allow us to tell these stories that are so important to everybody. Look at how we got through the pandemic. If you couldn't go to work or you were stuck at home and couldn't go out, you watched television or you listened to music or you watched movies. And that was the work of our members. And we didn't work for those intervening years while those companies made record profits. So we just want, let's be honest and let's say, hey, let's get us to the point where everybody can afford to have health care, pay their rent, put a roof over their heads, and feed their families.
Let's talk about that for a second, because the streaming services, obviously were huge during the pandemic. And as you pointed out, made a huge amount of money. I've got a friend who keeps telling me, well, they're just being unreasonable with the streaming services because the streaming services are new. And I'm going, no, I don't think so. I think they're not new, and I think they're wildly profitable. And I don't know that they're accurately telling us how many people are viewing this stuff. So is streaming, is that a huge part of what's going on, especially with the writers? Do you see that in your contract fight too?
It is, because we have allowed it to be treated as new media going all the way back to Netflix about 10 years ago and going back to HBO before that. We've made allowances in the past for new media companies to come in and try and change the market and get more work opportunities for our members. What we found now is it's 10 years ago since Netflix won an Emmy for House of Cards, and that's when they kind of exploded. The lack of transparency about how many subscribers they have and what the model is for residuals. And I think that's the toughest thing for people to understand, is that in 1960, we kind of took and changed our pay formula from just being the session fee per day to also include contributions to our health and pension fund, which was created then. And then this concept of residuals, realizing that there would be a chain down the road, whether it was reruns on linear television, or it was usage and views on streaming services, or it was re-release, or how many theaters that it showed in across the country and across the internationally, that we would participate in that revenue stream for as long as that work continued. And that's the second big part of our pay piece. It's a big component of who we are, is that we've agreed to take less over time to get those residuals. And that's
so you're investing your time and your talent in the hopes that it's going to pay off long term. Right. So that actually saves the studios a boatload of upfront costs, which means a lot more things can be done. It sounds like, again, the working people are doing the sacrificing, making the concessions, and the well-to-do keep walking away with more and more. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show with Elliot Bales. He's an actor and member of SAG-AFTRA and Actors Equity. You want to check out his website, elliotbales.com. We'll get links out on social media how you can do that. Now, I do want to get to this AI thing, because, I see this as that first fight, that first little battle of what the war is coming, and that's most of us being replaced at some point by automation or robotics. So however I see your fight right now happening, I think sets the tone for all the rest of us. Be it a dumb truck driver like me who's worried about at some point in my lifetime there will be no drivers behind the wheel, to to lawyers and doctors and who knows. So what you're doing, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is really the first battle that you don't have a choice but to fight.
It certainly impacts directly right now the technology that's available. If you've got an aging parent like I do, whose Facebook account has been spoofed, and her image and her voice and her pictures have been taken to try and get somebody to give them money, we're already there. We've been there for a while now, and that's just a simple example. But the technology is getting more and more advanced and evolved. And so I see this both. We've said all along, this is not an entertainment dispute. This is a labor dispute.
Right.
This at its core is a fight for every worker. And I believe that it goes all the way to the Congress of the United States, because I think this is a legislation issue. How do we protect the rights of Americans? In 1996, Congress passed HIPAA. And that said, no doctor can give away your medical information without your express consent every time they do it. That's the same place we need to get to in terms of how we control AI, which is here, and then we use it. We're using AI right now to talk and to broadcast and to take pictures and make phone calls. And we appreciate those things that it brings. But how do we protect our privacy? How do we protect ourselves? And how do we protect our jobs going into the future?
That is the question, and AI is going to be a huge part of this future. So, what do you want people to know? I mean, at the end of this, you are right, 100%. This is a labor issue, and I don't think I've ever framed it as an entertainment issue. This is people trading hours of their life for wages that support their family. At the end of the day, I don't care what you do, from being an actor like you to a truck driver, a street sweeper. You deserve to earn a reasonable life-sustaining wage, and we should be fighting for that. But what do you want folks to know? What's the message that if you had the 30-second elevator speech to give to somebody, what is that?
I think that it is that we are a part of the American labor movement and the restoration of the strength of American labor in the United States. Far too long we've allowed large corporate organizations and their CEOs and institutional investors to control American life, and thereby by controlling the American worker and what they pay and what they don't pay, and by creating political systems that allow them to do that. I think it's time for some of that to be reversed, and to restore that to those powers and those authorities and those protections to every American and the American worker, because that's how the country survives and thrives into the future. And so I think that's the biggest thing for me is we have some beautiful and well-spoken people that get a lot of attention. They're celebrities, and we're using them, and we hope that that's a message that comes through. At the same time, you're going to see a lot of stories, because the same people who control most of the large news media organizations are the very same employers that we are trying to negotiate against. So a lot of the stories will be coming in the next few weeks, and already are now, about some internal struggles and internal strife. We're in the middle of a labor election, which happens in most labor unions at some point. And so we're going to have some of that, but we're like siblings, like all siblings are. We're going to scrap, we're going to fight, we're going to argue, we're going to talk about this piece and that piece. But at the end, it's all about taking down and bringing to the table for a true negotiated deal those yacht riding, Ferrari driving, mansion and dwelling executive.
Yeah, it's all about getting what you earn. You mentioned the studios getting bigger and all this. Is consolidation a huge problem in your industry?
I think we're kind of at the end of that. Part of the big problem they brought to the table, and it's a reasonable one, is they all jumped into streaming without a plan, without a good, thorough business analysis. I'm an entrepreneur. I have to do analysis for my business. I have to know what I can afford and what I can't afford. And they've all jumped in, and they've extended themselves too far. And now the market's flooded. And so that's why you see Bob Iger at Disney saying, "I'm going to sell ABC. I'm going to sell ESPN. I can't. It's away from our core business."
Go ahead.
So I think we may be on the verge of kicking things out and breaking things up, and I think we would love to see that happen.
That'd be a good thing. Lastly, a moment ago you brought up senators and you brought up some political stuff. Have you gotten much support from the politicos? Joe Biden says he's the most pro-labor president, at least of my lifetime, and I say he is. So anything there? Any help?
I think we're a little early in the process of striking to get to that point yet. But I will say, I think a perfect example is something called the Performing Arts Tax Parity Act, which is a bill that has been in the House since 2014. It has 51 co-sponsors as of today. I'm leading one of the teams with Actors Equity to try and get this passed, and they are bipartisan. There are Republicans and Democrats that are on board saying this is important. We need to take care of these folks who spend 20 to 30% of what they make just getting the next job. And so that's the kind of support we're getting. More people are signing on to that every day, and we hope we'll get that through. And I think that's indicative of the kind of support.
That's the marching order. Elliot, I appreciate you taking some time filling us in. I hope you'll come back and give us some more insight as this hopefully goes on a very short period of time. I fear it's going to be a long one, but I hope you'll come back and talk to us again.
Thanks, Rick, and thanks for taking the time and representing American workers well.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much. Elliot Bales. The website, elliottbales.com. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at that. I want to hear your thoughts. I keep saying this is the front lines of the AI war. Do you agree? Right back after this. Stick around.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania to the auto factories of Michigan to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
We are AFGE. We support our nation's military and our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders and provide services to our nation's seniors. Across the country and here in Washington, D.C., the American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
So the Heritage Foundation, one of those right-wing think tanks, they published some of the same kind of garbage they normally do. But this one is the 2023 Index of Economic Freedom. And you know where this is going to go. Joe Biden's destroying economic freedom. Joe Biden has led the country into the worst economic freedom country in the world. And according to them, we now have the worst rating since the first one in 1995. It's the worst it's ever been. According to the Heritage Foundation, the worst economic freedom time in the history of the country from 1995 till today. And according to them, there are 16 European countries who are now freer. They are now freer than you. And it's one of those things that makes me go, explain that, please. Give me some thoughts here on what you mean. Oh, you mean, capital to do whatever it wants? And no regulations and no government intervention. And because understand what economic freedom in their world means. It means capital gets to do whatever the blanket wants to do. And you lowly working people, well, not so much. You're just a tool to be used and discarded. And this is one of these moments because I think the conservative movement is a little afraid. I think they're scared. Because what's happening is the younger generation of conservatives aren't buying the smaller, less intrusive government in business operations. They're not buying the tax breaks, and they're not buying the deregulation like past generations did. It was a blind faith. You ask any conservative 10 years ago, what do you stand for? And it was low taxes, deregulation, and small government. That was their mantra, and they had it down. They focus group tested it, think tank approved it, and they slew it out to the masses. And the masses ate it up. It's simple. It's easy to remember. They put it all over bumper stickers. So you're driving down the road. Any idiot can go, oh, yeah, small government, low taxes. Yeah, deregulation. Oh, that's great stuff. Oh, yeah. Well, these younger people are now seeing what a crummy tax code like ours has done, what deregulation has done, what business-friendly, laissez-faire policies have done to their parents and their families, and they're kind of going, "No, I'm not so interested, not so interested." And what's interesting to me is the article I was reading said, Donald Trump has done this to us. Because conservatives are trying to figure out how to get rid of Trump, because in their words, Bernie Sanders and former President Donald Trump are not that far apart when it comes to free trade. And they're not. And I've been saying that, I don't know, since 2015. So it's good for the right-wing publication over there at the Washington Examiner to finally go, hey, yeah, they're not that far apart. Now, what I find interesting, again, is they're really concerned about the free market. They're concerned that all of the work that they've done, all of the damage they've done over the last, 1971 till today, the last 50 years, all the damage they've done is going by the wayside. It's going to be undone by a younger generation who sees just how bad it's been to their parents, but still conservative on those other issues, the social stuff. Still don't like transgenders, still don't like LGBT stuff, the cultural identities, abortion, that's their thing. And this week, the National Conservative Student Conference is happening in D.C. This is where the folks at the Young America's Foundation has their big shindig, where they bring some kids in and they do some grooming, some good old-fashioned grooming. Because this is what they do to these young people. They groom them by pushing this garbage down their throats. And what this conference is going to be about is going back to that idea of free enterprise, free markets, small government, where today's conservatives want to use big government. They want to be Ron DeSantis. They want to be Florida. They want government in everyone's bedroom. They want government involved in policing corporate America and their choosing of advertising. Now, what's interesting is the Budweiser thing is capitalism working. It's the free market. And this, if I were conservatives, I would be saying, yeah, this is capitalism working. We don't need government. We, the people, did it. We don't need any government intervention. But no, young people are saying, no, we want government intervention. And that is scaring the ever-loving bejeebus out of old school conservatives, because they don't know how to deal with this. Because for them, it was just about greed. It was just about more for us. All those social issues were meant to divide, those working people, keep them pitted against each other, so that you could keep stealing from them. And one of the central tenets of my North Star is always, how do we ensure that working people get a fair shake and a decent wage for their labor? The hours of your life that you give to a corporation to make profit off of, you should get a portion of that. I'm not saying all of it, but you should get a portion of it. And we're not. And that's the thing that's really interesting to me, in that, the right is seeing it. The right is kind of, the conservative right is kind of afraid. All of that work, all of that treatise to save free enterprise could be going up in smoke because it's gone too far. We've given these big corporations so much. We've given the wealthy incredible amounts of wealth through a bogus tax code, that finally even they're seeing it. That finally even some conservatives are going too far. Because one of the complaints is that on the trade issue, the Trump voters, the Trump faithful, they're with Sanders on the trade issues, on the work issues. They're with Democrats on those issues. There is a path, and this is where Republicans have a problem. If Democrats get their heads out of their behinds and start talking to, instead of demonizing, people who may have voted for Trump in the past, but saying, hey, look, these are the issues that are important. The economic stuff. There's a chance to basically make the Republican Party obsolete, because they're a party without a message. Their central message was always, tax cuts for the rich, free trade for corporations. and small government so that corporate American could run roughshod over them. What are you going to do when conservatives are saying, no, we want a government that's going to take on special interests and the very wealthy? What happens when conservatives start going, you know what, those student loans that I've been taking out as a kid, I'm paying for generation. How about we tax rich people to help us pay for that education? What's the conservative movement going to do? Because we're in a moment. Understand, the economy is moving slowly in the right direction. The sad reality is the working class of this country is being left behind in a lot of places. And this is why, I like Joe Biden. I like him a lot. He's doing the right thing on a lot of levels. But strengthening the ability to fight for better wages, hours, conditions, get people the ability to unionize, to speak up, to make sure that we protect work. Big stuff. Want to hear your thoughts, though? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. We'll take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
It doesn't matter what kind of weather. It doesn't matter what time of day or night. When Mother Nature's done her worst, the only thing that matters to us is keeping the lights on for you. The hardworking women and men of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, dedicated to keeping the power on in communities all across the country. Because when bad weather strikes, we know what matters most. IBEW, the power professionals.
Before we close the program, we want to take a moment to thank our viewers and to share a little bit about why we do what we do. At The Rick Smith Show, we believe that media today is almost entirely controlled by corporate greed. So we have now 24-hour news channels. But instead of 24 hours of news, what we get is 1 hour repeated 24 times, and with tons of commercials creating obscene amounts of profits. Information once presented as a public service has now become a private commodity. So when lies make money, lies are what we get. We get a corporate-controlled rage machine feeding us anger and hate, trying to convince us that our problems are right, left, or red, blue, when they are and always have been up, down, the wealthiest 1% versus the rest of us. Our goal is to be an alternative to that machine, not as a news show with a fancy journalist out front, but as a talk show run by a union truck driver and a team of working class heroes just like you. Everything we do, both what we get right and what we get wrong, is dedicated to advancing the interests of America's working families. No corporate ad buys, no think tanks, no focus groups, no talking points. We are media by working people for working people. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.